I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. This is a tale about betrayal, justice, and how sometimes the people you least expect have the most power. I arrived at my beach house with rental agents and discovered my son-in-law vacationing with his mistress, supposedly on a work trip. He sneered, "Tell my wife if you want. She's too scared to leave me." I nodded slowly and made one call, not to my daughter, but to someone who would destroy him. The October sun warmed my face as I pulled into the driveway of my Myrtle Beach house. Two rental agents chatted excitedly in the back seat about staging and market potential. I'd been dreading this moment for weeks, but Harold's medical bills had drained our savings, and even 3 years after his passing, I was still drowning in debt. "Mrs. White, this property is absolutely stunning," gushed Jennifer Hayes, the younger agent, her stilettos clicking on the wooden deck. "Oceanfront, 3 bedrooms, that gorgeous wraparound porch. We'll have no trouble finding buyers." I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking slightly. This house held 40 years of memories. Harold proposed to me on this very deck. Isabel took her first steps in the living room. But memories don't pay bills, and at 64 I needed to be practical. "The master bedroom has that incredible view," I said, pushing open the front door. "Harold always said he wanted to wake up to the ocean every—" I stopped mid-sentence. There were voices coming from upstairs, male and female, talking softly. My blood ran cold. "Is someone supposed to be here?" asked Robert Wilson, the senior agent, checking his phone. I shook my head, motioning for them to stay back. The voices were clearer now, coming from my bedroom. A man's deep laugh followed by a woman's giggle. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crept up the stairs, the old floorboards betraying my presence with soft creaks. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. Through the gap I could see movement on my bed. My grandmother's quilt tangled around 2 figures. The man's back was turned to me, but I knew those broad shoulders, that perfectly styled dark hair. Richard Green, my son-in-law. The woman beneath him definitely wasn't my daughter Isabel. This woman was blonde, younger, with perfectly manicured nails currently running through Richard's hair. "When do you have to be back?" the woman asked, her voice breathy. "Not until Sunday night," Richard replied, pressing kisses along her neck. "I told Isabel I had that investors' conference in Atlanta. She never questions my business trips." My vision blurred with rage. Isabel was home in Charleston, probably making Richard's favorite dinner for when he returned, while he was here desecrating my marriage bed with his mistress. "Richard Green," I said loudly, pushing the door open. The scene that followed would have been comedic if it weren't so devastating. Richard jerked upright, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and panic in rapid succession. The blonde woman, barely older than Isabel, scrambled to cover herself with my quilt. "Mrs. White," Richard stammered, grabbing a pillow to cover himself. "I can explain." "Can you?" I crossed my arms, amazed at how calm my voice sounded. "Explain to me why you're in my house, in my bed, with someone who isn't my daughter." The woman was frantically gathering her clothes. "I should go," she whispered. "Stay right there, Alicia," I said sharply. Her startled expression confirmed what I already suspected. I knew exactly who she was. Alicia Morgan, the 28-year-old marketing coordinator from Richard's firm. Isabel had mentioned her before, how Richard always praised her work. Richard's shock was wearing off, replaced by something uglier. "Look, what Isabel doesn't know won't hurt her." I stepped closer. "My daughter loves you. She defends every late night, every business trip, every time you make her feel small." "Isabel's fine," he snapped, pulling on his pants. "She has everything she wants. House, car, that ridiculous shopping habit. She's not exactly suffering." The casual cruelty in his voice made my stomach turn. "She wants your love, Richard, your respect, Your faithfulness." He laughed. Actually laughed. "Faithfulness. Come on, Mrs. White. Isabel's gotten comfortable. She stopped trying years ago. Look at Alicia here." He gestured to the trembling young woman. "She appreciates what she has." "Get out," I said quietly. "Now wait a minute," Richard said, his tone shifting to that condescending voice he used when he thought he had the upper hand. "Let's be reasonable. You need to sell this place, right? I heard Isabel talking about your financial situation. Maybe we can work something out." The audacity was breathtaking. "Work something out?" "I could help with the listing. Maybe find a buyer through my contacts. For the right price, of course. All you need to do is forget what you saw here." I stared at him for a long moment. This man who had systematically isolated my daughter from her friends, her family, her own sense of worth. Who made her believe she was lucky to have him? "Or," Richard continued, his voice taking on an edge, "you can tell Isabel what you saw. Go ahead. She's too scared to leave me anyway. She knows she'll never find anyone else willing to put up with her issues." That's when something snapped inside me. Not broke, but snapped into place, like a puzzle piece finally finding its home. "You're right," I said calmly. "I should tell Isabel." Richard's relief was visible. "Good. I knew you'd be reasonable." I pulled out my phone, but instead of calling Isabel, I scrolled to a different number, one I hadn't used in over 2 years. "Wait," Richard said, unease creeping into his voice. "Who are you calling?" I smiled as the call connected. "Hello, Marcus. It's Clara White. Remember how you said to call if I ever needed anything? Well, I think it's time we had that conversation about Richard Green." Richard's arrogance evaporated like morning mist. "Who the hell is Marcus?" I continued my phone conversation, never breaking eye contact with my son-in-law. Yes, the same Richard Green we discussed before. It seems my suspicions were correct. I paused, listening. "Wonderful. I'll send you the photos in an hour." "Photos," Alicia squeaked from behind the bed. I held up my phone, showing them the pictures I'd snapped while they were too distracted to notice. Amazing what these smartphones can capture these days. Richard lunged toward me, but I stepped back into the hallway. "I wouldn't if I were you." "You're bluffing," Richard said, but his voice shook. "You don't know anyone named Marcus." The truth was, I knew Detective Marcus Davis quite well. He'd been Harold's partner on the Charleston police force for 15 years before Harold retired to become a private investigator. "Get dressed and get out of my house," I said firmly. "Both of you. Now." 10 minutes later, I watched Richard's BMW speed away, sand kicking up behind his tires. The rental agents had tactfully waited in their car after I'd told them we needed to reschedule. As I stood alone on the deck, the ocean breeze tangled my hair. For the first time since discovering them, my hands began to shake. Not with fear, but with a strange sense of anticipation. Harold had taught me that patience and observation were the most powerful tools in any investigation. And I had just started investigating Richard Green. "He did what?" Marcus Davis's deep voice carried across the small cafe in downtown Charleston. At 58, he still had the commanding presence of a detective, though he'd retired from the force 3 years ago. His salt and pepper hair was cut short, and the lines around his eyes had deepened since I'd seen him last. "Caught him in my beach house with his marketing coordinator," I repeated, keeping my voice low. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd, but I didn't want to risk being overheard. Charleston was a small city in many ways. Marcus shook his head, stirring his coffee absently. "I always thought that guy was too smooth. How's Isabel taking it?" "I haven't told her yet." I wrapped my hands around my tea mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "Clara," Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "It's been 3 days. I know," I sighed, feeling the weight of my decision. "But it's complicated. This isn't just about an affair. Marcus leaned forward, his expression shifting from concerned friend to investigator. What do you mean? Before Harold died, he was looking into Richard's business dealings. Something about inconsistencies in their client accounts. Marcus nodded slowly. I remember. He mentioned his concerns a few times. Said the numbers didn't add up. Harold was never able to finish his investigation, but he was convinced Richard was embezzling from the company. I found his notes after he passed. And you've been watching Richard ever since, Marcus concluded. I nodded. Just little things. Comments about clients, trips that didn't match company events, purchases that seemed beyond what he should be able to afford on his salary. Clara, if you suspect financial crimes, you should go to the FBI. With what? Suspicions and 3-year-old notes? I shook my head. I need proof, and I think this affair might be our way in. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then reached across the table to cover my hand with his. Harold always said you would have made a better detective than either of us. I smiled at the memory. Harold had always appreciated my attention to detail, my ability to connect seemingly unrelated events. I'm worried about Isabel, I admitted. Richard has changed her. The vibrant, confident artist I raised has disappeared. She second-guesses everything, isolates herself from friends. When I try to talk to her about it, she gets defensive. Classic signs of emotional abuse, Marcus said quietly. I know, and that's why I can't just tell her about the affair. She's too fragile right now. If I push too hard, she might cut me off completely, and then she'd be truly alone. So what's your plan? I took a deep breath. I want to find concrete evidence of Richard's financial crimes. Something so undeniable that Isabel can't explain it away or blame herself. Marcus's eyes narrowed. And you think you can get this evidence how? I need to talk to people at his company. Former employees, current ones who might have suspicions. But I don't know where to start. Marcus pulled out a small notebook, a habit he'd never broken from his detective days. Let's think this through. Who at the company might know something and be willing to talk? There's William Jackson, a senior accountant. Isabel mentioned that he and Richard had some kind of disagreement last year. And James Morrison, the financial director. He's been with the company longer than Richard. Marcus jotted down the names. Anyone else? Richard's assistant might know his schedule, who he meets with. Her name is... I frowned, trying to remember. Patricia Gonzalez, I think. Good. I can run some preliminary background checks, see if any of them have financial troubles or reasons to be disgruntled. People talk when they're unhappy. As Marcus continued taking notes, I gazed out the window at the historic buildings of downtown Charleston. Somewhere across the city, Isabel was going about her day, unaware that her world was about to change forever. Clara, Marcus said gently, drawing my attention back. Are you sure you want to do this? Once you start down this road, I'm sure, I said firmly. I've watched Richard manipulate and diminish my daughter for 5 years. I've bitten my tongue, respected her choices, been the supportive mother. But this, I shook my head. This is different. Okay, Marcus nodded. But we do this carefully, by the book. No cutting corners or anything that could compromise a potential case. Of course, I agreed. Harold would expect nothing less. As we finished our lunch, Marcus promised to make some discreet inquiries. We agreed to meet again in a few days to share information. Walking back to my car, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabel. Dinner tonight? Richard has another late meeting. Just us girls? I smiled sadly at the message. Another late meeting. Another lie she'd been told. I'd love that, I texted back. My place at 7? Perfect, she replied. Love you, Mom. I clutched the phone to my chest, tears pricking at my eyes. "I love you too, sweetheart," I whispered to the empty street. "More than you know." "You seem distracted, Mom," Isabel said, twirling pasta around her fork. "Is everything okay with the beach house?" We were sitting at my small dining table, sharing a simple dinner of spaghetti and salad. At 34, Isabel was still strikingly beautiful, with Harold's dark hair and my green eyes. But there was a fragility to her now, a careful way she held herself, as if afraid of taking up too much space. "Just thinking about what to do with it," I replied, offering a partial truth. "The rental agents think it could sell quickly, but I'm not sure I'm ready." "I know how much that place means to you." Isabel reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "But you have to do what's practical. The medical bills are manageable," I assured her, though that wasn't entirely true. Harold's insurance had covered some of his cancer treatments, but the experimental therapies we'd tried in those final desperate months had drained our savings. I was keeping my head above water, but barely. "Richard says he might know some investors looking for beach properties," Isabel offered. "He could make some calls." The mention of Richard sent a chill down my spine. "That's thoughtful, but I'd prefer to work with the agents." Isabel's smile faltered slightly. "He's just trying to help, Mom." "I know, sweetheart." I forced a smile. "Tell me about your week. How's the graphic design project going?" The subtle shift in conversation worked. Isabel lit up as she described her latest freelance assignment, designing logos for a local boutique. Before marrying Richard, she'd been a promising artist with her own studio. Now she only took occasional freelance work that didn't interfere with her duties at home, as Richard put it. "The owner loved the concepts," she said, a hint of her old confidence shining through. "She wants me to design her entire branding package." "That's wonderful. Will you take it?" A shadow crossed her face. "I'm not sure. Richard thinks I'm already stretching myself too thin with the charity committee and maintaining the house." I bit back my immediate response, that Isabel had managed a full-time career, volunteering, and her own apartment before Richard, and instead asked gently, "What do you think? Would you enjoy the project?" "I would," she admitted. "But Richard says—" "I'm asking what you say," I interrupted, keeping my voice soft. Isabel looked startled, as if the concept of her own opinion independent of Richard's was foreign. After a moment, she shrugged. "It doesn't matter. We don't need the money, and Richard likes me to be available for business dinners and events." I nodded, filing away this information. The controlling behavior extended beyond just emotional manipulation. Richard was systematically ensuring Isabel had no independent income or professional identity. After dinner, as we washed dishes side by side, I carefully broached another topic. "How's William Jackson doing? You mentioned he and Richard had some tension last year." Isabel looked surprised. "William? I'm not sure. Richard doesn't really talk about work colleagues with me anymore." She hesitated, then added, "Though come to think of it, I haven't seen William at company functions recently." "Oh? Did he leave the company?" "Maybe. I can ask Richard." She passed me a plate to dry, then frowned. "Why the sudden interest in William?" I scrambled for a plausible explanation. "I ran into his wife at the grocery store. She seemed troubled. I thought maybe something was wrong at work." "That's odd. I don't remember Richard mentioning any problems." Isabel's brow furrowed. "Though he has been working late more often lately. He says they're preparing for a major audit." An audit. That could explain Richard's increased anxiety, especially if there were financial irregularities. I made a mental note to share this with Marcus. As we finished the dishes, Isabel's phone buzzed. Her face changed when she checked the message, a mixture of anxiety and resignation washing over her features. "Richard?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. "He's finished earlier than expected. Wants me to come home. But we were going to watch that movie. I know. I'm sorry. She was already gathering her purse and jacket, movements quick and nervous. Rain check? I walked her to the door, fighting the urge to beg her to stay, to tell her everything I knew. Instead, I hugged her tightly. I love you, Isabel. Never forget that. She looked momentarily puzzled by my intensity, then smiled. Love you too, Mom. I'll call tomorrow. As I watched her drive away, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Richard Green had taken so much from my daughter, her confidence, her career, her independence, but he wouldn't take her future, not if I could help it. The next morning, I met Marcus at his small private investigation office near the harbor. The space was modest but professional, with degrees and certifications hanging on the walls alongside photos of Marcus with Harold in their police uniforms. I've got something, Marcus said without preamble, motioning me to the visitor's chair across from his desk. He pushed a folder toward me. William Jackson left Green Investment Partners 9 months ago. Officially, he resigned to pursue other opportunities. Unofficially. He tapped the folder. I opened it to find printouts of social media posts and local news articles. What am I looking at? Jackson filed for bankruptcy 3 months after leaving the firm. His wife left him, taking their kids to her parents in Ohio. He's been working as a night auditor at a hotel downtown and attending AA meetings. He's an alcoholic? Apparently became one after leaving Green Investments. Marcus leaned forward. People don't usually spiral like that after voluntarily leaving a job for better opportunities. You think Richard forced him out? I asked, scanning the documents. I think it's worth having a conversation with William Jackson. Marcus checked his watch. He gets off work at the Hampton Inn at 7 a.m. We could catch him leaving his shift. The decision was easy. Let's go. As Marcus drove us downtown, I stared out at the early morning streets of Charleston. The sun was just beginning to illuminate the historic buildings, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets. Church steeples punctuated the skyline, a reminder of the city's deep history and traditions. Are you religious, Clara? Marcus asked suddenly, following my gaze to the steeples. The question surprised me. Harold and I went to church when Isabel was young, less so as we got older. Why? Just thinking about justice, he replied. Some people believe it only comes in the afterlife. Others, like Harold and me, spent our careers trying to create it here and now. And what do you believe? Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I believe that people like Richard Green count on good people doing nothing. They hide behind respectability and connections, thinking they're untouchable. But they're not, I said quietly. No, Marcus agreed, pulling into the hotel parking lot. They're not. We waited in the car, watching the employee entrance. At 7:10, a man emerged, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. William Jackson looked nothing like the polished financial professional in the company photo Marcus had shown me. His clothes were clean but rumpled, his face haggard, with several days' worth of stubble. Let me approach him alone, I said. He doesn't know you. Marcus nodded. I'll stay close. Be careful. I got out of the car and walked toward William, summoning my most unthreatening grandmotherly demeanor. Mr. Jackson? William Jackson? He stopped, wariness immediately replacing exhaustion. Who's asking? My name is Clara White. I'm Isabel Green's mother. Recognition flickered in his eyes, followed quickly by alarm. I've got nothing to say about Richard Green or his company. He started walking faster toward the bus stop. I kept pace with him. I'm not here on Richard's behalf. Quite the opposite. That made him pause. What's that supposed to mean? It means my late husband suspected Richard was embezzling from the company. It means I recently discovered Richard is cheating on my daughter. and it means I think you know something that could help me protect Isabel." William's gaze darted around the parking lot. "Lady, you have no idea what you're getting into. Richard Green is not someone you want to cross." "He's hurting my daughter," I said simply. Something in my tone must have reached him. He sighed deeply, then checked his watch. "I have 20 minutes until my bus comes. There's a coffee shop across the street. But I'm not promising anything." As we walked to the coffee shop, I texted Marcus our location. Inside, William chose a table in the back corner, positioning himself to see both the door and the windows. The behavior of someone who felt hunted. After we'd ordered, black coffee for him, tea for me, William studied me with bloodshot eyes. "How much do you know?" "Not enough," I admitted. "My husband Harold was investigating financial irregularities at Green Investments before he died 3 years ago. He believed Richard was siphoning money from client accounts." William's jaw tightened. Harold White, the ex-cop turned PI. I remember Richard was nervous about him asking questions. "So there was something to find?" William took a long sip of his coffee, then set the cup down with deliberate care. "Mrs. White, have you ever heard the expression, 'the perfect crime'?" "Of course." "Richard Green hasn't committed the perfect crime. What he's done is create the perfect scapegoat." His eyes, when they met mine, were filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. Or rather, scapegoats, plural. A chill ran through me. "What do you mean?" "I mean that when, the financial crimes at Green Investments are discovered, there will be a trail of evidence pointing directly to several employees, including me." He laughed bitterly. "Why do you think I drink? Every day I wake up wondering if today's the day the FBI comes knocking." "But if you're innocent..." "Innocence is a luxury, Mrs. White. Richard made sure that any investigation would find my electronic signature on dozens of unauthorized transactions. Transactions I never made." William leaned forward. "And I'm not the only one he set up." "Who else?" "James Morrison, for one. And..." William hesitated, then met my eyes directly. "And your daughter." The world seemed to stop. "Isabel? But she doesn't even work for the company." "No, but she's married to the CEO. She has access to accounts, credit cards, properties purchased with company funds. Richard has been careful to involve her in just enough activities to implicate her without her knowledge." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. "He's setting up his own wife to take the fall?" William nodded grimly. "Insurance policy. If anyone gets too close, he can claim ignorance. Suggest that Isabel was working with disgruntled employees like me. He's got paperwork with her signature, transactions that went through their joint accounts." "But that's..." I couldn't even find words for such betrayal. "Like I said, Mrs. White, Richard Green is not someone you want to cross." William finished his coffee and stood up. "My bus will be here soon." "Wait," I said desperately. "Would you be willing to talk to someone else? A former detective who could help build a case?" William hesitated. "I've got a 6-year-old daughter in Ohio who thinks her daddy is just working far away for a while. I can't risk prison." "What if we could prove your innocence, and others?" "You'd need access to the company's internal servers. Financial records going back at least 5 years. Communications between Richard and certain special clients." William shook his head. "Not happening." An idea began forming in my mind. What if we had someone on the inside? Someone with access? The only person with that kind of access is Richard himself, or maybe... His eyes widened slightly. "James Morrison. He's still there, still has full system privileges as financial director." "Would he help us?" William laughed without humor. "James? He's terrified. Has a wife with MS, 3 kids in college. He can't afford to lose everything." "But if the alternative is prison..." William considered this. "Maybe. but you'd have to convince him you can actually protect him, and that's a tall order. As he turned to leave, I asked one more question. William, why did Richard target you specifically, out of all the employees? William paused at the door, a sad smile crossing his face. Because I noticed the discrepancies first. Started asking questions. Richard doesn't tolerate questions. He hesitated, then added, Also, I made the mistake of mentioning your husband's inquiries to him. Suddenly I was out, with a trail of fabricated evidence behind me. After he left, I sat there, tea growing cold, mind racing with implications. Marcus joined me a few minutes later. How much did you hear? I asked. Enough, he replied grimly. Isabel's in danger, Clara, not just emotional danger. I nodded, the weight of William's revelations settling heavy on my shoulders. We need to move quickly. But carefully, Marcus cautioned. If Richard suspects we're investigating, he might accelerate his plans or destroy evidence. Or worse, I said quietly, he might cut Isabel off from me completely. Marcus reached across the table, covering my hand with his. We won't let that happen, I promise. As we left the coffee shop, I glanced at my phone. A text from Isabel. Had fun last night. Richard's out of town this weekend for that Atlanta conference. Lunch Saturday? Another lie. Richard had no conference. But this time his lie was my opportunity. Marcus, I said slowly, I think I know how we can get access to their house while Richard is away. Marcus raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. It's time I helped my daughter rediscover her artistic talents, I said, a plan forming, starting with redecorating her home office. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, the October sun casting a golden glow over Charleston's historic streets. I arrived at Isabel and Richard's Georgian-style home in the upscale South of Broad neighborhood, with coffees, pastries, and a car full of decorating supplies. Mom, this is too much, Isabel laughed as she helped me unload painting supplies and fabric swatches. I only mentioned wanting to update my office. Nonsense, I replied, balancing a tray of coffees. When was the last time we had a mother-daughter project? Besides, I've been watching those home makeover shows. I need to practice on someone. The house was impeccable as always, a showcase rather than a home. Everything matched the neutral, sophisticated aesthetic Richard preferred. No bright colors, no personal mementos cluttering surfaces. Even the family photos were professionally taken, everyone posed and perfect in muted tones. Richard trusts my design sense with my office, Isabel explained as we entered the small room off the main hallway. As long as it looks professional if clients ever visit. Of course, I agreed, taking in the space. Like the rest of the house, it was tasteful but impersonal. A desk with a company laptop, bookshelves with business texts and decorative objects, a small seating area. Nothing of Isabel's artistic spirit remained. What did you have in mind? I asked, setting down the coffees and pastries. As Isabel excitedly shared her ideas, slightly bolder than the rest of the house, but still restrained, I discreetly observed the laptop on the desk. That would be my target later, but for now, I focused on my daughter. Remember your studio apartment after college? I asked, pulling out paint samples. Those gorgeous turquoise walls with the gold accents. Isabel smiled wistfully. Richard would never allow that color scheme in the house. But this is your space, I countered gently. It's still part of our home. She hesitated, then selected a safe gray-blue. Maybe just an accent wall with this? For the next hour, we moved furniture, taped trim, and prepared to paint. It was the most relaxed I'd seen Isabel in years, away from Richard's watchful eye. As she stretched to reach a high corner, her sleeve pulled back, revealing a fading bruise on her wrist. My heart stuttered. Isabel, what happened to your arm? She quickly pulled her sleeve down. "Oh, nothing. I bumped into the kitchen counter." The casual lie, delivered with practiced ease, told me everything. This wasn't the first time, nor was it a counter. I thought of Harold, how fiercely protective he'd been of our daughter, and felt a surge of rage so powerful it nearly took my breath away. "I need to use the restroom," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Back in a moment." In the hallway, I paused to compose myself, focusing on our plan. Getting angry wouldn't help Isabel. Evidence would. When I returned, I brought up a casual question. "Is Richard's conference going well? Which hotel is he staying at in Atlanta? Maybe we could send him dinner as a surprise." "The Westin," Isabel replied, focused on painting. "But he's in meetings all day. Said not to bother calling because reception is spotty in the conference rooms." Another lie to file away. I knew exactly where Richard was and who he was with. Marcus had followed him to a cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains with Alicia Morgan. "Shame," I said lightly. "I remember when your father would travel, I'd always call the hotel and have them deliver his favorite dessert." Isabel smiled. "That's sweet, Mom. Maybe next time." Around noon, I suggested we break for lunch. "Why don't we walk to that little cafe on the corner? The paint fumes are giving me a headache." "Great idea," Isabel agreed, putting down her brush. "Let me just wash up." As soon as she left the room, I moved quickly to the desk. From my purse, I removed the small USB drive Marcus had provided. It contained specialized software that would create a backup of selected files and communications, evidence we needed from Richard's company laptop. My hands trembled slightly as I inserted the drive into the laptop's port. The screen prompted for a password. I'd anticipated this obstacle and had come prepared. During one of our dinners, Isabel had mentioned that Richard used the same password for everything, the name of his first dog combined with his birth year. "Ranger 1982, I typed carefully. The screen flashed, then granted access. The software began running automatically, just as Marcus had instructed. A progress bar appeared, showing the copy process. I glanced nervously at the door, straining to hear Isabel's movements upstairs. The bar seemed to move painfully slowly. 15%, 22%, 30%. Footsteps on the stairs sent a jolt of panic through me. The copy was only at 45%. I quickly minimized the window and opened a browser, navigating to a home decorating website. "Mom?" Isabel called from the hallway. "In here," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Just looking up some design ideas while you were getting ready." Isabel appeared in the doorway, hair freshly brushed, face lightly made up. Even for a casual lunch, she maintained the polished appearance Richard expected. The progress bar, visible only to me at the bottom of the screen, showed 62%. "What did you find?" she asked, coming toward the desk. I quickly clicked on a random image. "Look at this color scheme. Similar to what we're doing, but with gold hardware." Isabel leaned over to see better, and I angled the screen slightly to keep the progress bar from her view. 78%. 85%. "That's beautiful," she said. "Though Richard thinks gold fixtures are tacky." "Richard isn't always right," I replied before I could stop myself. Isabel drew back slightly, surprise crossing her face. I rarely criticized her husband directly. "I just mean that style is subjective," I softened, checking the progress bar. 95%. 98%. Everyone has different tastes. "Richard has excellent taste," Isabel said defensively. "He manages million-dollar investment portfolios. Understanding quality is part of his job." The copy completed and a small notification appeared. I quickly closed it, then shut the browser. "Ready for lunch?" As we walked to the cafe, I felt the weight of the USB drive in my pocket. It contained the first real evidence against Richard, and possibly the key to freeing my daughter from his control. After lunch, we returned to finish painting the office. The afternoon passed pleasantly, with Isabel gradually relaxing and sharing more stories about her graphic design projects. Beneath our conversation, my mind kept returning to the bruise on her wrist, the lies about Richard's whereabouts, the subtle ways he controlled every aspect of her life. As I was packing up the leftover supplies, Isabel's phone rang. Her entire demeanor changed instantly, back straightening, voice shifting to a higher, more cheerful pitch. "Hi, honey. How's the conference?" I pretended to focus on cleaning brushes while listening intently. "No, just working on my office with Mom," Isabel said. "A small update, nothing major. Yes, I remember the budget we discussed. No, I didn't use the credit card. Just supplies we already had and some leftovers from Mom's projects." The one-sided conversation continued, with Isabel growing increasingly defensive and apologetic. When she finally hung up, her earlier relaxation had vanished. "Richard's coming home early," she said, tension evident in her voice. "His final sessions were canceled." "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," she replied quickly. "He's just concerned about expenses right now. The company's going through a financial review." "Isabel," I began carefully, "is Richard having money problems?" "No," she said firmly. "The business is doing very well. He's just careful. The word hung in the air between us. Careful about money while buying luxury cars and designer watches. Careful about Isabel's spending while conducting an affair that included weekends at beach houses and mountain cabins. "What would you think about dinner at my place tomorrow night?" I suggested. "I could invite Marcus Davis. You remember him? Dad's old partner. He asks about you whenever I see him." Isabel hesitated. "I'm not sure Richard would want to." "Just you," I clarified. "I know Richard is busy, but it's been so long since you've connected with people from your father's life." After a moment, Isabel nodded. "I'd like that, if Richard doesn't need me for anything." As I drove home with the USB drive safely in my pocket, I thought about the girl Isabel had once been. Confident, creative, independent. Somewhere beneath Richard's controlling influence, that girl still existed. I just needed to help her find her way back to the surface. That evening, I met Marcus at his office to review what the software had found. "This is worse than we thought," Marcus said grimly, scrolling through financial records. "Richard hasn't just been embezzling from the company. He's been running a full-blown Ponzi scheme." "Meaning?" I asked. "He's been using new investor funds to pay returns to existing clients while skimming millions off the top. When the market turned last year, he should have taken heavy losses, but he reported gains to all his clients." "How much has he stolen?" Marcus pointed to a spreadsheet. "At least 2.3 million that I can trace so far, but there's more." He clicked on another file. "These are transfers to offshore accounts in the Caymans, another 1.5 million at least." "And the evidence against Isabel?" I asked, dreading the answer. Marcus pulled up several documents. "Richard has been careful. Her electronic signature appears on dozens of fraudulent transfers. There's a paper trail showing she attended meetings with clients who were part of the scheme. And perhaps most damning, he brought up bank statements. Large deposits into their joint account corresponding with major client investments." I felt sick. She had no idea. "I believe you," Marcus said. "But a prosecutor might be harder to convince. On paper, it looks like she was a willing participant." "What about William Jackson? James Morrison?" "Similar setups. Richard created a perfect triangle of blame. If one person claims innocence, the evidence points to the other two as accomplices." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "It's actually quite brilliant in a sociopathic way. So what do we do now?" "We need more," Marcus said firmly. "This is enough to understand his scheme, but we need communications showing Richard orchestrated everything, and we need someone on the inside to testify." James Morrison, I said, remembering William's suggestion. He's still at the company, still has access, and still terrified, according to William. Marcus tapped his fingers thoughtfully on the desk. We need leverage. I've invited Isabel to dinner tomorrow night, I told him. I suggested you join us. Good, Marcus nodded. I can start building rapport, so when the time comes to tell her the truth, she has someone besides you to trust. As I left Marcus's office, the weight of what we'd discovered settled heavily on my shoulders. Richard wasn't just a cheating husband or a controlling partner. He was a criminal who had deliberately implicated my daughter in his crimes. The stakes had just gotten much higher. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the bruise on Isabel's wrist, hearing the way her voice changed when Richard called. I thought about Harold, what he would do in this situation, and found both comfort and direction in his memory. Harold had always said that predators counted on two things: the silence of their victims and the complexity of their crimes. Our job was to break that silence and simplify the complexity until justice became inevitable. Tomorrow, I would begin breaking the silence. Not with Isabel yet. She wasn't ready to hear the truth. But there were others who needed to talk. Others who had been hurt by Richard Green. I would find them, one by one, and piece together the full picture of the man who had so thoroughly deceived my daughter. As dawn broke over Charleston, I made myself a promise. Richard Green would face justice for his crimes. Not just the financial fraud, but the deeper, more personal crime of stealing my daughter's spirit. And I would be there to help Isabel rebuild when his house of lies finally collapsed. The aroma of my famous pot roast filled the house as I set the dining table for 3. Comfort food seemed appropriate tonight, something familiar and grounding as I gradually brought Isabel back into contact with people from her past, people who remembered who she used to be before Richard. The doorbell rang precisely at 6:30. Marcus was nothing if not punctual, a trait he shared with Harold. I brought wine, he said, handing me a bottle of Cabernet. His eyes asked a silent question. Are we ready for this? I nodded slightly. Isabel should be here any minute. Clara? Marcus lowered his voice. I found something this morning about Richard's past. My pulse quickened. What? His father wasn't the successful businessman Richard claims. Walter Green was an alcoholic who lost multiple jobs due to his temper. There were domestic disturbance calls to their house in Savannah at least a dozen times during Richard's childhood. I absorbed this information, pieces clicking together. So Richard's polished image is a complete fabrication, Marcus confirmed. He reinvented himself after college, changed his accent, cut ties with family. The perfect, prestigious background is as much a lie as everything else. The doorbell interrupted our conversation. When I opened it, Isabel stood there looking uncertain, checking her watch. Am I late? I tried to leave on time, but Richard needed me to organize some files for his morning meeting. You're right on time, I assured her, hugging her. Come in. You remember Marcus. Dinner started awkwardly. Isabel was reserved, answering questions politely, but volunteering little. I recognized Richard's conditioning. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't draw attention to yourself. But gradually, as Marcus shared stories about Harold, her posture relaxed. By dessert, she was actually laughing at tales of her father's rookie days on the police force. I'd forgotten how Dad used to practice his intimidating detective face in the bathroom mirror, she said, smiling at the memory. He never quite mastered it, Marcus chuckled. Harold had too much kindness in his eyes. That's why we made such good partners. I could play bad cop convincingly. You two were quite the team, I said, watching Isabel's face soften with reminiscence. Dad always said you were the best detective he ever knew, Isabel told Marcus. Marcus looked surprised. He said that? All the time. Isabel sipped her wine. He trusted you completely. A shadow of sadness crossed Marcus's face. I miss him. Charleston PD hasn't been the same without him, even after I left. Why did you leave the force? Isabel asked. Wanted to choose my own cases, Marcus replied. As a private investigator, I can focus on helping people who really need it, not just whoever the department assigns. Like when Dad went private, Isabel nodded. He was happier then. He was, I agreed, carefully steering the conversation. Especially when he could use his skills to protect people from being taken advantage of. Marcus caught my cue. That's the most satisfying work, helping victims of financial scams, uncovering fraud, the cases your father and I both specialized in. Isabel's phone buzzed with a text. The relaxed woman of moments before vanished, replaced by tension as she read the message. Richard? I asked, already knowing the answer. She nodded. He's home earlier than expected. Wants me back. Her eyes darted nervously to the clock. I should go. Of course, I said, hiding my disappointment. Let me pack some leftovers for you. As I wrapped food in the kitchen, I overheard Marcus gently engaging Isabel. Your father would be proud of you, he said. He always talked about your artistic talent. That was a long time ago, Isabel replied, her voice small. Talent doesn't disappear, Marcus said. It just waits for the right moment. When I returned with the packaged food, Isabel seemed thoughtful. Maybe I'll try painting again, she said quietly. Just for myself. I'd love to see that, I told her, my heart lifting at this tiny rebellion. After she left, Marcus and I sat at the kitchen table, strategizing our next move. She's more trapped than I realized, I said. Did you see how she changed when Richard texted? Marcus nodded grimly. Classic control tactic. He's monitoring her time, making sure she doesn't get too comfortable away from him. What's our next step? James Morrison, Marcus said decisively. He's the key. According to the files we found on Richard's computer, Morrison has access to everything. Client records, communication logs, wire transfers. And he's still at the company, I added. But how do we approach him? William said he's terrified of Richard. Everyone has a pressure point, Marcus said. For Morrison, it's his wife's medical care. MS treatments are expensive, and their insurance through Green Investments covers most costs. I thought for a moment. What if we offer him protection? Not just legal, but financial. We'd need resources for that. More than I have, certainly. But I might, I said slowly, an idea forming. The beach house. It's worth about $800,000 in today's market. If I sell it... Clara, no, Marcus protested. That house means everything to you. Isabel means everything to me, I corrected him. The house is just wood and memories. I can't lose my daughter to that monster. Marcus's expression softened. Let's table that for now. First, let's see if Morrison will talk without financial incentives. The next morning, Marcus and I positioned ourselves outside Green Investment Partners' downtown office building. The gleaming glass tower reflected the Charleston skyline, a testament to the success Richard had built on deception and theft. There he is, Marcus nodded toward a middle-aged man exiting the building, briefcase in hand. James Morrison looked every bit the successful financial director. Tailored suit, confident stride. But the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. Mr. Morrison? I approached him at the coffee cart where he'd stopped. I'm Clara White, Isabel Green's mother. Recognition flashed in his eyes, followed immediately by wariness. Mrs. White. Yes, we've met at company events. He glanced around nervously. Is there something I can help you with? I believe we can help each other, I said quietly. This is Marcus Davis, a private investigator. We need to talk somewhere private. I have meetings all day, Morrison said, his discomfort evident. Perhaps another time. Marcus stepped closer. It's about the financial irregularities at Green Investments and how Richard has implicated you in them. Morrison's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about. We talked to William Jackson, I said gently. We know, James. His hand trembled slightly as he paid for his coffee. Fine. 20 minutes. There's a park 2 blocks east. Meet me there. As we waited on a secluded bench, I watched autumn leaves dance across the path, golden and red against the green grass. Such beauty amidst such ugliness. Morrison arrived precisely 15 minutes later, constantly checking over his shoulder. Whatever you think you know, you don't, he began without preamble. And I can't help you. We have copies of financial records, Marcus said. Transfers, client accounts, offshore movements. We know Richard has been running a Ponzi scheme for years. Morrison's professional facade cracked. Then you also know he's arranged for the evidence to implicate others, including me. And my daughter, I added. That's why we're here, Mr. Morrison, to protect Isabel, you, and anyone else Richard has used as a potential scapegoat. You can't protect anyone, Morrison said bitterly. Richard is too connected, too careful. Do you know how many people he's paid off? Judges, regulatory officials, even a contact at the SEC. No system is perfect, Marcus countered. With enough evidence, the right pressure points. You don't understand what you're up against, Morrison interrupted. It's not just Richard. There are powerful clients involved, people who don't want their investments scrutinized. Like who? I pressed. Morrison checked his watch. I've already said too much. Your wife's MS, I said quietly. The treatments are working, aren't they? The experimental drug trial? Surprise flashed across his face. How did you... Richard holds her health care over your head, I continued. The insurance, the access to clinical trials. If you cross him, she suffers. Morrison's shoulders slumped. She's finally stable. After years of decline, she's actually improving. I can't risk that. What if we could guarantee her care? I offered. Regardless of what happens with Richard. Hope flickered briefly in his eyes, then died. You can't make that promise. I'm prepared to sell my beach house, I said firmly. The proceeds would ensure your wife's treatment continues, no matter what. Morrison stared at me in disbelief. Why would you do that for strangers? Because Richard Green has stolen my daughter's spirit, I replied, and I want it back. For a long moment, Morrison was silent, weighing his options. Finally, he spoke. I can't give you anything directly. Richard monitors everything. Emails, phone calls, even physical documents. My heart sank. Then how? But, he continued, lowering his voice, there's an annual audit starting next week. External auditors will have access to our systems. If someone were to guide them to look in certain places, Marcus leaned forward. You could provide a roadmap. Morrison nodded slightly. I might have already documented certain inconsistencies, as insurance. Where is this documentation? I asked. Safety deposit box, First Palmetto Bank. My wife has access. He stood up. I need to get back. If Richard suspects anything... One more question, Marcus said. Daniel Harris. What's his role? Morrison's expression darkened. Harris handles the offshore accounts, creates the legal structures to hide the money. Stay away from him. He's dangerous in ways Richard isn't. Thank you, I said sincerely. We'll be in touch about your wife's treatments. As Morrison walked away, Marcus turned to me. You'd really sell the beach house? In a heartbeat, I confirmed. But first, let's see what's in that safety deposit box. Contacting Morrison's wife proved delicate. We couldn't risk Richard discovering our connection. Eventually, Marcus arranged a meeting under the guise of a home healthcare evaluation. Elizabeth Morrison was a gentlewoman with keen intelligence shining from eyes too old for her 50 years. MS had taken its toll physically, but her mind remained sharp. "James told me you might come," she said, inviting us into their modest home. "He didn't explain much, just that you needed access to his insurance policy." "It's complicated," I acknowledged, "but it involves protecting innocent people from a financial scheme." "Including James?" she asked directly. "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "Your husband has been set up to take the fall if the fraud is discovered." Elizabeth nodded slowly. "I've suspected something was wrong. James hasn't slept through the night in months." She handed us a key. "Box 447. I haven't looked inside myself." The contents of the safety deposit box exceeded our expectations. Morrison had meticulously documented years of fraudulent activities, account manipulations, forged client authorizations, fabricated returns, and most importantly, direct communications from Richard ordering these actions. "This is incredible," Marcus breathed, examining the files. Morrison documented everything: dates, amounts, specific instructions from Richard. But the most disturbing discovery was a folder labeled simply Contingency. Inside were carefully constructed evidence trails implicating Morrison, William Jackson, and Isabel in all of Richard's crimes. "Look at this," I said, hands shaking as I reviewed a document with Isabel's signature. He practiced forging her signature. "These authorization forms are all falsified." "And the timeline," Marcus noted. "He's arranged it so Isabel appears to be the primary initiator, with Morrison and Jackson as her accomplices." "He was planning this for years," I whispered, horror washing over me. "Setting up his own wife to take the fall." The evidence was overwhelming. Richard had stolen over $4 million through his scheme, using new investor funds to pay fictional returns while siphoning millions offshore. And he'd created an elaborate escape plan. When the scheme inevitably collapsed, Isabel, Morrison, and Jackson would face federal charges while Richard disappeared with the money. "We need to take this to the FBI," Marcus said firmly. "Today." Hours later, we sat across from Special Agent Sophia Washington in the Charleston FBI field office. Her no-nonsense demeanor reminded me of Harold, focused, meticulous, with an unwavering commitment to justice. "This is substantial," she acknowledged, reviewing the evidence. "But we'll need more to make charges stick against someone like Richard Green. He has connections, expensive lawyers." "James Morrison will testify," I assured her, "and possibly William Jackson." "And your daughter?" Agent Washington asked gently. "We'll need to question her. These documents suggest she had no knowledge of her husband's activities, but we'll need to verify that." My heart sank. She doesn't know anything yet. Not about the fraud, not even about his affair. "Mrs. White," Agent Washington leaned forward, "your daughter's world is about to shatter. She should hear it from you first, not from federal agents or a news report." "I know," I admitted. "I've been trying to protect her, to gather enough evidence that she couldn't deny the truth." "There's no easy way to deliver news like this," she said kindly. "But delay will only make it worse." As Marcus drove me home, I wrestled with the impossible task ahead, telling Isabel that her husband was not only unfaithful, but a criminal who had planned to let her take the blame for his crimes. "I'll come with you," Marcus offered. She trusts me now, at least a little. "No," I decided. "This needs to come from me. But I need a few days to find the right way." Fate, however, had other plans. 2 days later, as I was preparing talking points for my conversation with Isabel, Marcus called, his voice urgent. "Turn on the news. Channel 4. Now." I fumbled for the remote, heart pounding. The screen filled with a live shot of Richard's office building, FBI agents escorting people from the entrance. "Breaking news in downtown Charleston," the reporter was saying. "FBI agents have raided the offices of Green Investment Partners amid allegations of major financial fraud. Sources tell us CEO Richard Green is being questioned in connection with a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme." My phone rang immediately. Isabel. "Mom," her voice was shaking uncontrollably. "Are you watching the news? They're saying terrible things about Richard. They took him away in handcuffs." "Isabel, listen to me," I said as calmly as I could. "Where are you right now?" "Home. 2 FBI agents are here with a search warrant. They're going through everything. They keep asking me questions about accounts I've never heard of." "Mom, what's happening?" "I'm coming over," I said firmly. "Don't say anything else to anyone until I get there. I'm bringing someone who can help." I called Marcus as I grabbed my car keys. "It's happening now. The FBI raided Richard's office." "I heard," he replied. "I'm already heading to their house. Meet you there." The scene at Isabel and Richard's home was chaotic. FBI agents methodically searched the property while a tearful Isabel sat frozen on the living room sofa. When she saw me, she ran into my arms like a child. "They're saying Richard stole money," she sobbed against my shoulder. "That he was running some kind of scheme. It's not true, Mom. It can't be." I held her tightly, meeting Marcus's gaze over her head. His expression confirmed what I already knew. There was no more time to prepare her gently. "Isabel," I said softly, guiding her back to the sofa. "There are things I need to tell you, things about Richard that will be hard to hear." Her eyes widened with fear. "What things? Mom, you're scaring me." "Richard has been stealing from his clients for years," I began, holding her hands firmly in mine. "Running what's called a Ponzi scheme, using new investor money to pay fake returns to existing clients while taking millions for himself." "No," she shook her head vehemently. "That's impossible. I would have known." "He was very careful to keep you in the dark," Marcus said gently. "But there's more, Isabel. And it's important you understand the full picture before you talk to the FBI again." Over the next hour, we laid out everything: the evidence of fraud, the offshore accounts, and most devastatingly, how Richard had systematically created a paper trail to implicate Isabel if the scheme was discovered. "These signatures," Marcus showed her several documents. "They appear to be yours, but they're forgeries. Richard was setting you up to take the fall." Isabel stared at the papers, shock giving way to disbelief, then anger. "Why? Why would he do this to me? I trusted him completely." I took a deep breath, knowing the final blow would be the hardest. "There's one more thing, sweetheart. About 3 weeks ago, I went to the beach house with some rental agents. I was planning to sell it to cover Dad's medical debts." Confusion crossed her face. "What does that have to do with Richard?" "He was there," I said quietly, "with Alicia Morgan from his office. They were together." Isabel's face went completely blank, as if her mind couldn't process one more betrayal. "No," she whispered. "He was at a conference in Atlanta." "There was no conference," Marcus confirmed gently. "We have evidence of multiple trips with Miss Morgan over the past year." For a long moment, Isabel was perfectly still. Then, without warning, she lunged for a framed photo of her and Richard, hurling it against the wall with surprising force. Glass shattered across the hardwood floor. "You knew," she rounded on me, fury replacing shock. "You knew and you didn't tell me." "I was trying to protect you," I explained. "I wanted proof of his crimes first, so you couldn't deny the truth." "You had no right to keep this from me." Tears streamed down her face. "All these weeks I've been defending him, loving him, while he—" Her voice broke. Your mother was gathering evidence to protect you, Marcus interjected. If she'd told you immediately, Richard might have destroyed the evidence or fled with the money. So everyone knew? Isabel looked between us. You've been investigating my husband behind my back? Making me look like a fool? No, sweetheart. I tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. We were trying to save you from prison. Richard had set it up so you would take the blame. I need you both to leave, Isabel said suddenly, her voice ice cold. Now. Isabel, please, I pleaded. You shouldn't be alone right now. I've been alone for years, she replied bitterly. I just didn't know it. As Marcus and I reluctantly prepared to leave, a female FBI agent approached Isabel. Mrs. Green, we need to ask you some follow-up questions about these accounts. Marcus stepped forward, handing the agent his card. Mrs. Green will answer questions only with her attorney present. I can recommend someone specialized in financial crimes. The agent nodded, surprisingly accommodating. Of course. We have no reason to believe Mrs. Green was involved, but procedure requires we thoroughly investigate all parties. Outside, I leaned against my car, emotionally exhausted. She hates me. She's in shock. Marcus corrected gently. Give her time. What happens now? Richard will be formally charged. Based on the evidence, he's looking at 15 to 20 years for wire fraud, money laundering, and securities violations. Marcus checked his phone. I've contacted Catherine Blackwell, the best white-collar crime defense attorney in Charleston. She'll represent Isabel. Will Isabel need a defense? The FBI agent seemed to suggest she wasn't a suspect. Precautionary, Marcus assured me. Catherine will make sure Isabel is formally cleared of any involvement. That evening, alone in my house, I tried repeatedly to call Isabel. Each attempt went straight to voicemail. I sent texts, left messages, but received no response. The local news ran constant coverage of Richard's arrest, calling it the largest financial fraud in Charleston history. Reporters had already begun camping outside Isabel's home. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Isabel standing there, eyes red-rimmed, clutching an overnight bag. The reporters won't leave me alone, she said flatly. Can I stay here? Of course, I stepped aside, relief washing over me. You can stay as long as you need. She walked past me without making eye contact. I'm still angry with you. I understand, I said, following her to the guest room. Is there anything you need? Isabel set her bag down and finally turned to face me. Why didn't you just tell me, Mom, when you first saw them together? I sat on the edge of the bed, choosing my words carefully. Because I knew you wouldn't believe me. Richard had you so convinced of his perfection, so isolated from everyone who loves you. If I'd told you without proof, he would have twisted it, made you doubt me completely. He already did that, Isabel admitted quietly. Whenever I mentioned you, he would make little comments, how you were stuck in the past, how you were jealous of our success. Eventually, I stopped bringing you up. I noticed, I said softly. It broke my heart to watch him separating you from everyone who loved the real you. Isabel sat beside me, leaving careful distance between us. The FBI showed me everything, the forged signatures, the accounts in my name. If they hadn't caught him, she shuddered, I would be facing charges. That's why we had to be certain before telling you, I explained. We needed enough evidence to overcome any doubts, any explanations Richard might offer. Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost inaudibly, she asked, Was any of it real? Did he ever love me at all? The vulnerability in her voice broke my heart. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. I don't know, sweetheart. I wish I had an answer that would hurt less. A sob escaped her, then another, until she was crying uncontrollably against my shoulder. I held her as the dam broke, years of suppressed emotions pouring out in desperate waves. "I gave up everything for him," she cried. "My art, my friends, my dreams, everything." "But you're still here," I reminded her gently. "Still Isabel, still my brilliant, creative daughter." Eventually, her tears subsided, replaced by physical exhaustion. As she lay down, I covered her with a blanket, just as I had when she was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "Get some sleep," I whispered. "Tomorrow will be easier." But morning brought a new complication. I was preparing breakfast when Isabel emerged from the bathroom, face pale. "Mom," she said, her voice barely audible, "I'm pregnant." The spatula fell from my hand, clattering against the skillet. "Pregnant? Are you sure?" She nodded, looking both terrified and strangely calm. "I've suspected for a couple weeks. Took a test this morning to confirm." "Oh, sweetheart." I guided her to a chair. "How do you feel about this?" "I don't know," she admitted, hands instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Yesterday I thought I was having Richard's baby, the man I loved, who loved me. Now you're having your baby," I said firmly. "A child who will be loved unconditionally, regardless of who their father is." Isabel looked up at me, vulnerability etched in every feature. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom. Everything is falling apart." "Not everything," I countered, taking her hands. "You have me. You have your health, your talent, your strength, even if you can't feel it right now." "What will people say?" she whispered. The pregnant wife of Charleston's biggest fraud?" "They'll say whatever they want," I replied. "But it won't define you or this child. You get to write your own story, Isabel. Richard doesn't get to dictate that anymore." As we sat there, morning sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt a shift in the air between us. The anger hadn't disappeared, but something new had emerged alongside it. Determination. The same stubborn resolve Isabel had shown as a child learning to ride a bicycle, as a teenager perfecting her painting technique, as a young woman establishing her first art studio. "I need to talk to the FBI again today," she said, straightening her shoulders. "Tell them everything I know, even the things that seemed innocent at the time. Maybe they'll help make sense of what Richard was doing." "I'll go with you," I offered. Isabel nodded, accepting my support for the first time since the revelation. "And after that," she continued, a flicker of her old fire returning, "I want to go to the art supply store. I need to start painting again." In that moment, watching my daughter begin to reclaim her identity piece by piece, I realized we had already won the most important battle. Richard had taken her confidence, her independence, her trust, but he hadn't managed to destroy her core. Beneath the layers of his manipulation, the real Isabel had survived, and she was fighting her way back to the surface. "All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Patricia Reynolds presiding." The courtroom fell silent as the judge entered, her expression stern beneath silver-streaked hair. I squeezed Isabel's hand reassuringly. After months of preparation, Richard's trial had finally begun. He sat at the defense table, somehow looking both confident and cornered. The expensive suit couldn't hide his diminished stature. 4 months in county jail awaiting trial had stripped away his polished facade. When he turned to scan the gallery, his eyes locked with Isabel's. I felt her tense beside me. "It's okay," I whispered. "He can't hurt you anymore." The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Vanessa Carter, delivered a devastating opening statement, methodically outlining Richard's crimes. "The evidence will show that Richard Green orchestrated one of the most calculated financial frauds in South Carolina history," she told the jury. "He didn't just steal $4.3 million from trusting clients. He created an elaborate scheme to frame innocent people, including his own wife, if his crimes were discovered. Richard's attorney, Edward Thompson, was equally polished in his defense. The prosecution has built a circumstantial case based on the testimony of disgruntled employees with their own motives. Mr. Green looks forward to clearing his name of these outrageous charges. As witnesses took the stand over the next 3 days, Richard's scheme unraveled thread by thread. James Morrison testified first, his voice strengthening as he detailed years of manipulation and threats. Richard made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, my wife's medical coverage would disappear, Morrison explained, and he had documentation ready to implicate me if the fraud was ever discovered. William Jackson followed, describing how Richard had systematically driven him from the company when he asked too many questions. He destroyed my career, my marriage, my reputation, William said, looking directly at Richard. When I confronted him about the discrepancies in client accounts, he told me I should worry about my daughter's college fund instead of company business. Throughout the testimony, Richard remained impassive, occasionally whispering to his attorney. But his composure cracked when FBI financial analyst David Chen presented a detailed timeline of the fraud. These documents clearly show that Mr. Green created parallel accounting records, Chen explained, displaying evidence on the courtroom screen. The official records showed clients earning consistent returns. The actual records, hidden on encrypted servers, showed massive losses being covered by new investor funds. And what about these signatures? Prosecutor Carter asked, presenting a series of documents. Our analysis confirms they are sophisticated forgeries, Chen replied. Mrs. Green's genuine signature was digitally traced and applied to authorization forms dating back 3 years. Richard shifted uncomfortably for the first time. His attorney immediately requested a brief recess, which the judge granted. In the hallway, Isabel leaned against the wall, one hand protectively covering her slightly rounded belly. At 5 months pregnant, she had finally begun to show. "Are you okay?" I asked, concerned by her pallor. "We can step outside for some air." She shook her head. "I need to hear everything. I need to understand what he did." Her voice strengthened. "What he tried to do to me." When court resumed, Catherine Blackwell, Isabel's attorney, approached us. "Isabel, you're on the witness list for tomorrow. Are you prepared?" "As much as I can be," Isabel replied. "Remember," Catherine advised, "just tell the truth. Your complete lack of knowledge about Richard's activities is your strongest defense." That night, Isabel barely touched her dinner. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place we'd shared countless meals throughout her life. But tonight, the air felt charged with anticipation and dread. "What if I can't answer their questions?" she worried, pushing pasta around her plate. "What if I seem guilty because I didn't know what was happening in my own marriage?" "You were a victim, not an accomplice," I reminded her. "The FBI has already cleared you of any wrongdoing. Your testimony is to establish Richard's deception, not to defend yourself." "I just keep thinking about all the warning signs I missed," Isabel said quietly. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way he always handled all our finances. "That's what predators count on," I said. "They don't start with obvious control or abuse. They build it so gradually that by the time it's unmistakable, you've lost your perspective." Isabel looked up, a question in her eyes. "Is that why you didn't tell me right away? When you found him with Alicia?" "Partly," I admitted, "but mostly because I needed evidence you couldn't deny. Richard had convinced you to doubt your own judgment. If I'd simply told you what I saw, he would have twisted it somehow." "He was very good at that," Isabel acknowledged, "making me question myself." "Your father saw through him from the beginning," I said softly. "He never said it directly, but that's why he started looking into green investments. He was worried about you." Tears filled Isabel's eyes. "I wish Dad were here now." "He is, sweetheart." I reached for her hand. In all the ways that matter. The following morning, Isabel took the stand, her navy blue maternity dress lending her a dignified grace despite her obvious anxiety. Richard watched her intently as she was sworn in, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Green," Prosecutor Carter began gently, "how would you describe your husband's explanation of his business to you?" "Vague," Isabel replied, her voice steadier than I'd expected. "Richard always said investment details were too complex to explain to someone without financial training. Did you ever question this?" "At first. But Richard would become irritated if I asked too many questions. Eventually, I stopped asking. Did you have access to the company's financial records or client accounts?" "No." Richard kept his work completely separate from our home life. "Yet your signature appears on dozens of financial documents authorizing transfers from client accounts. How do you explain that?" Isabel met the prosecutor's gaze directly. "Those aren't my signatures. I never saw those documents until the FBI showed them to me after Richard's arrest." No further questions. Richard's attorney approached next, his smile calculated to appear friendly. "Mrs. Green, you benefited significantly from your husband's financial success, didn't you? The house in South of Broad, luxury vehicles, expensive vacations." Isabel didn't flinch. "We lived comfortably, yes. In fact, bank records show you spent over $30,000 last year on clothing and personal items alone. Did you ever question where this money came from?" "Richard told me his investment strategies were exceptionally successful," Isabel replied. "I had no reason to doubt him." "No reason?" Thompson raised his eyebrows. "Even when your joint account received deposits of $50,000 or more at a time, didn't that seem unusual for a small investment firm?" "Objection," Carter interrupted, badgering the witness. "Sustained," Judge Reynolds said sharply. "Mr. Thompson, proceed with caution." Thompson switched tactics. "Mrs. Green, when exactly did you inform your husband about your pregnancy?" The question caught Isabel off guard. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Please answer the question." Isabel glanced at me briefly before responding. "I haven't told him. I discovered I was pregnant after his arrest." "Isn't it true," Thompson pressed, "that you and your husband had been trying to conceive for over a year?" "Yes," Isabel admitted. "So this pregnancy was planned and desired by both of you?" "It was at the time." "Yet you haven't bothered to share this life-changing news with your husband?" Thompson's implication hung in the air. "Is that because you've already decided to divorce him and deny him access to his child?" "Objection!" Carter stood. "Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's bias against my client," Thompson argued. "I'll allow it," the judge ruled. "The witness will answer." Isabel took a deep breath. "I haven't told Richard about the pregnancy because I'm still processing the fact that my husband was planning to send me to prison for his crimes, that he forged my signature on documents that would have destroyed my life, that he was sleeping with his marketing coordinator while I was at home, believing he was at business conferences." Her voice remained measured but intense. "So yes, I'm reconsidering every aspect of my relationship with Richard Green, including co-parenting." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Thompson's strategy had backfired spectacularly. "No further questions," he said stiffly. The most dramatic testimony, however, came from James Morrison on the trial's 5th day. "Mr. Morrison," Prosecutor Carter asked, "did Richard Green ever directly discuss his contingency plans regarding Mrs. Green's potential involvement?" Morrison nodded gravely. "About a year ago, when I expressed concern about the mounting fraud, Richard assured me that he had insurance. He said, and I quote, 'If anything goes south, Isabel's signature is on enough documents to keep investigators busy for years while I handle damage control.'" Richard's face darkened as Morrison continued. "When I asked if he was seriously suggesting his wife might take the blame, he laughed and said, Isabel's so desperate to please me she'd probably confess to anything rather than admit I betrayed her. He seemed proud of how completely he controlled her. Isabel's hand found mine, squeezing so tightly it hurt. I could feel her trembling. "Do you need to step out?" I whispered. She shook her head firmly. "I need to hear all of it." The climax of the trial came during closing arguments. Prosecutor Carter systematically dismantled each of Richard's defenses, ending with a devastating conclusion. "The evidence has shown beyond reasonable doubt that Richard Green isn't just guilty of financial crimes. He committed the ultimate betrayal, methodically planning to sacrifice his own wife's freedom to save himself." When the jury left to deliberate, Marcus joined us in the courthouse corridor. "You were magnificent," he told Isabel. "Your testimony was perfect." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but it felt good to finally speak the truth." "The jury won't be out long," Marcus predicted. "The evidence is overwhelming." He was right. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. We filed back into the courtroom, Isabel between Marcus and me. She had refused Richard's attorney's suggestion that she sit with her husband for the verdict. "On the count of securities fraud, how do you find?" Judge Reynolds asked the jury foreman. "We find the defendant guilty," the foreman replied clearly. "On the count of wire fraud?" "Guilty." "On the count of money laundering?" "Guilty." As the litany of guilty verdicts continued, I watched Richard's rigid posture crumble. By the 6th guilty, his head was bowed, shoulders slumped in defeat. Beside me, Isabel remained perfectly still, face expressionless. Judge Reynolds set sentencing for the following month and ordered Richard taken back into custody. As officers approached, he turned suddenly toward the gallery, eyes finding Isabel. "Isabel," he called desperately, "tell them they're wrong about me. You know me better than anyone." For a moment, the courtroom froze. Every eye turned to my daughter. Slowly, deliberately, Isabel stood, one hand resting on her visibly pregnant belly. "Yes, Richard," she said, her voice carrying clearly. "I finally do know you." Richard's eyes widened as he registered her condition. The officers escorted him away before he could respond, his expression shifting rapidly between shock, anger, and calculation. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. Marcus and Catherine created a protective barrier as we made our way to the car. "Mrs. Green, how does it feel to know your husband was planning to frame you? Do you think Richard married you as part of his scheme? Is it true you're pregnant with his child?" We ignored them all, finally reaching Marcus's car at the edge of the courthouse parking lot. Only when we were safely inside, driving away from the chaos, did Isabel finally break her composure, tears streaming silently down her face. "It's over," I said softly, holding her hand. "He can't hurt you anymore." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Not over, just beginning." Richard was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. The judge's words were scathing. "You violated not just your client's trust, but the most sacred trust between husband and wife. Your calculated plan to frame your own spouse shows a moral bankruptcy that deserves the maximum sentence." The financial aftermath was complex. The FBI recovered approximately $2.8 million from Richard's offshore accounts, which would be distributed to his victims. Our beach house sold quickly, as the agents had predicted, and I used part of the proceeds to fulfill my promise to James Morrison, setting up a trust for his wife's ongoing medical care. Isabel filed for divorce immediately after the sentencing, citing extreme marital misconduct. Richard didn't contest it, perhaps recognizing the futility of fighting after his conviction. The divorce was granted in record time, with the judge sympathetic to Isabel's circumstances. "I want to change my name back to White," Isabel told me over breakfast one morning, 6 months after Richard's arrest. I don't want any connection to him, and I certainly don't want my child carrying his name. Are you sure? I asked gently. It's a big decision, she nodded firmly. I wasted 5 years trying to be Isabel Green. I want to be Isabel White again, the woman I was before he started dismantling me piece by piece. The name change was just one step in Isabel's long journey of healing. Some days were better than others. She moved into my guest house, a small cottage behind my home that Harold had built as his retirement project. Having her own space while remaining close enough for support seemed to be the perfect arrangement. I wake up sometimes and forget for a moment, she admitted during one of our evening walks along the Charleston waterfront. I reach for him before remembering everything. That's normal, I assured her. Healing isn't linear. I'm so angry, Mom, she confessed. Not just at Richard, but at myself. How could I have been so blind, so weak? You weren't weak, I corrected firmly. You were manipulated by someone who made isolation and control his life's work. Richard spent years studying how to break down your confidence, your connections, your sense of self. I let him, though, Isabel insisted. I gave up my art, my friends, everything that made me me. And now you're reclaiming it all, I reminded her. That takes tremendous courage. Slowly, painfully, Isabel began rebuilding her life. She started therapy with Dr. Sarah Jenkins, a psychologist specializing in recovery from emotional abuse. The weekly sessions were grueling but necessary. Dr. Jenkins says I need to acknowledge the grief, Isabel explained after a particularly difficult session. I'm not just grieving the husband I thought I had, but the life I thought I was living, the future I planned. It was all a lie, but the grief is real. As her pregnancy progressed, Isabel faced another difficult decision, whether to allow Richard any involvement in their child's life. He's a convicted felon serving 15 years, Marcus pointed out during one of our strategy sessions. You have solid grounds to deny visitation. But he's still biologically the father, Isabel sighed, rubbing her swollen belly. I don't know what's right. You don't have to decide everything now, I reminded her. Take it one step at a time. Isabel's water broke 2 weeks early on a rainy April morning. I rushed her to Charleston Memorial Hospital, where 13 hours later, she gave birth to a perfect baby girl with a shock of dark hair and Harold's chin. Hope, Isabel whispered, cradling her newborn daughter. Her name is Hope White. It's perfect, I said through tears, watching my granddaughter's tiny fingers wrap around Isabel's thumb. She's perfect. In those early weeks with Hope, Isabel seemed to find new strength. Motherhood gave her a purpose, a focus beyond her own pain. When Hope was 6 weeks old, Isabel set up an easel in the cottage's sunroom. I think I'm ready to try painting again, she told me tentatively, while Hope naps. I held back my excitement, not wanting to pressure her. That sounds wonderful. Her first attempts were hesitant, simple landscapes, tentative brushstrokes. But gradually, as spring turned to summer, her confidence returned. Colors grew bolder, compositions more complex. She began painting for hours while I happily watched Hope. One afternoon, I found her working on a striking canvas. Dark, tangled chains breaking apart against a background of brilliant sunrise. It's beautiful, I said, mesmerized by the raw emotion captured in each brushstroke. It's for a series I'm calling Liberation, Isabel explained, not looking up from her work. About breaking free from psychological captivity. By the time Hope was 6 months old, Isabel had completed 12 paintings in the series. Marcus suggested she show them to his friend Julian Pierce, owner of a small gallery in the Arts District. These are extraordinary, Julian said, examining the canvases in Isabel's makeshift studio. The emotion, the technique, I'd like to feature them in next month's exhibition. Really? Isabel looked shocked. But I haven't shown professionally in years. Talent doesn't disappear, Julian assured her. It just waits for the right moment. The night of the exhibition, I watched proudly as Isabel moved confidently among the gallery guests, discussing her work with critics and collectors. In a simple black dress, her hair swept up elegantly, she looked more like herself than she had in years, the self that existed before Richard. 9 paintings sold, Marcus reported, joining me by the refreshment table, including the centerpiece for $12,000. I'm not surprised, I replied, watching Isabel laugh genuinely at something a patron said. They're remarkable. She's remarkable, Marcus corrected, his admiration evident. To have survived what she did and create beauty from it. That's true strength. Clara, Isabel, a voice called from the gallery entrance. James Morrison approached, accompanied by a woman in a wheelchair, his wife Elizabeth. We wouldn't have missed this, Elizabeth said warmly, taking Isabel's hand. Your work is stunning. Thank you for coming, Isabel replied. Both of you. James looked healthier than when we'd last seen him at the trial, the haunted look gone from his eyes. The Morrison family is doing well, he told us. Elizabeth's treatments are working, and I've started a consulting business helping companies identify potential fraud. Turning pain into purpose. Isabel nodded approvingly. I understand that completely. As the evening wound down, I found Isabel standing before her centerpiece, breaking free, studying it with a contemplative expression. Penny for your thoughts, I said, joining her. I was just thinking about the woman who painted this, she replied. She was so angry, so broken. I still feel her inside me, but she's not all of me anymore. I slipped my arm around her waist. You're healing. Slowly, she agreed. But yes, as we left the gallery that night, arm in arm, I realized we had both been transformed by Richard's betrayal. Not broken, as he had intended, but strengthened in our wounded places. Mom, come meet someone, Isabel called, approaching with a distinguished-looking man in his 50s. This is Dr. Nathan Wright. He's been following my story and wants to discuss something with me. We had just finished packing up the last of the exhibition, which had been a remarkable success. All 18 paintings had sold, and Isabel had received commissions for 3 more. Mrs. White, Dr. Wright shook my hand warmly. Your daughter is remarkable. Her insights into emotional abuse could help thousands of women. What kind of help? I asked, instinctively protective. I run a nonprofit called Second Chance Foundation. We provide legal and financial counseling to abuse victims. I believe Isabel's artwork could be powerful in our educational materials, helping women recognize the subtle signs of control and manipulation. Isabel's eyes brightened with interest. That sounds meaningful. I've been thinking about how to use my experience to help others. We'd love to have you speak at our annual conference next month, Dr. Wright continued. Your perspective as someone who experienced financial abuse would be invaluable. I'm not a professional speaker, Isabel hesitated. You don't need to be, he assured her. Just tell your story. That's powerful enough. Over the following weeks, Isabel prepared diligently for the conference, working with Dr. Wright to craft her presentation. Hope, now 8 months old and crawling everywhere, spent more time with me as Isabel threw herself into this new purpose. Listen to this opening, Isabel said one evening, reading from her notes. Financial abuse doesn't begin with emptied accounts or forged signatures. It begins with, I'll handle the finances, don't worry your pretty head. It begins with, you don't need to work? I'll take care of everything. It begins with, maybe you should check with me before making that purchase. That's powerful, I said, bouncing Hope on my knee. And unfortunately very familiar to many women. That's what I'm discovering, Isabel nodded, reading the stories Dr. Wright shared from other survivors. So many patterns matched my experience with Richard. The isolation, the gradual erosion of independence, the constant subtle criticism. You've come so far in recognizing those patterns, I observed. That awareness will help others. The conference was held at a downtown hotel with over 300 attendees, mostly women, but some men too, professionals working in domestic violence prevention, counseling, and law enforcement. Isabel was scheduled to speak after lunch on the second day. I sat in the front row, heart bursting with pride as she took the podium. Gone was the timid, second-guessing woman Richard had created. In her place stood my daughter, confident, articulate, passionate. 3 years ago, she began, I couldn't buy a coffee without texting my husband for permission. 2 years ago, I stopped painting because he said my hobby was taking too much time away from my real responsibilities as his wife. 1 year ago, I discovered he had been systematically creating evidence to send me to prison for his financial crimes. The room was utterly silent, every person captivated. This isn't just my story, Isabel continued. It's the story of thousands of women who are controlled through financial manipulation. Women who don't recognize they're being abused because there are no bruises to show. Just empty bank accounts, isolated lives, and shattered confidence. For 40 minutes, she detailed the subtle progression of Richard's control, interspersing her personal experience with statistics and warning signs. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Many women were wiping away tears. Dr. Wright joined her on stage. This is why we do this work, he said, addressing the audience. Because for every story like Isabel's that ends with the abuser facing justice, there are hundreds where women remain trapped. Afterward, a line of women waited to speak with Isabel, many sharing their own experiences. I watched from a distance, giving her space to connect with those who needed her message most. She's a natural, Marcus commented, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. He had attended to support Isabel, a gesture that touched me deeply. She always had this strength, I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. Richard just buried it for a while. That evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant near the waterfront, Dr. Wright made Isabel an unexpected offer. I'd like you to join our board of directors, he said. Your perspective would be invaluable in shaping our programs. Isabel looked stunned. I don't have any qualifications in nonprofit management. You have lived experience, Dr. Wright countered. And based on today's presentation, a remarkable ability to communicate that experience in ways that resonate with both survivors and professionals. I need to balance it with my art and raising hope, Isabel cautioned. Of course, he nodded. Board meetings are quarterly, with some committee work in between. Very manageable for a single mother. Later that night, as we walked along the harbor, Isabel seemed deep in thought. What are you thinking about the offer? I asked. I'm thinking it sounds perfect, she admitted. Art feeds my soul, but this work? It gives meaning to everything I went through. Your father would be so proud, I said softly. He always said suffering should be transformed, not transmitted. Isabel smiled. I remember him saying that. I didn't understand it then. And now? Now I'm living it. 2 weeks later, Isabel received a call from a literary agent who had attended the conference. She wants me to write a book, Isabel told me excitedly, about financial abuse in marriages, about how smart, capable women can be systematically manipulated and controlled. That's a wonderful idea, I encouraged. Your voice needs to be heard. I want other women to recognize the warning signs I missed, she explained. I want them to know they're not alone and they're not stupid. Looking at my daughter, really looking at her, I realized that Richard's greatest crime wasn't stealing money. It was convincing a brilliant, talented, compassionate woman that she was weak and worthless. But he'd failed. Isabel was still brilliant, still talented, still compassionate, and now she was angry enough to fight back. The predator had awakened the warrior. 1 year after Richard's conviction, I stood in the back of Isabel's new art studio in downtown Charleston, watching her teach a painting workshop for domestic abuse survivors. Hope played happily in a corner playpen, now a walking, babbling toddler with her mother's creative spirit and determination. Art gave me back my voice when I had forgotten how to speak. Isabel was telling the women, "It doesn't matter if you've never painted before. This isn't about technical skill. It's about expressing what words can't capture." The transformation in my daughter still amazed me daily. Her book, Breaking Free, Recognizing and Escaping Financial Abuse, had been published 3 months earlier to critical acclaim. She balanced writing and speaking engagements with her art and board position at the Second Chance Foundation. Most importantly, she had reclaimed her confidence, her joy in life. "Mrs. White?" A voice drew my attention. Dr. Benjamin Harris, a distinguished cardiologist I'd met at several Second Chance events, stood beside me. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I smiled. "Please, call me Clara." "Clara," he corrected warmly. "I wanted to thank you for your donation to the Foundation's Legal Defense Fund. It's making a tremendous difference. After selling the beach house, I had invested most of the proceeds wisely, creating a comfortable retirement for myself while establishing a charitable foundation in Harold's name. The Foundation's mission, supporting victims of financial crimes, felt like the perfect tribute to my late husband's career in law enforcement. "It's meaningful work," I replied. "Harold would approve." "I was wondering," Dr. Harris continued, a touch of nervousness in his voice, "if you might be free for dinner this weekend. There's a new restaurant on King Street I've been meaning to try." The invitation caught me by surprise. At 65, I hadn't considered dating again, yet something about Benjamin's kind eyes and gentle manner was undeniably appealing. "I'd like that," I heard myself say. Across the room, Isabel caught my eye and raised an eyebrow questioningly. I gave a small nod, and her smile widened. Later, as we walked to the parking lot, Isabel couldn't contain her curiosity. "Was Dr. Harris asking you out?" "He might have been," I admitted, feeling suddenly self-conscious. "It's about time," she declared. "You've spent the last year focused entirely on Hope and me. You deserve some happiness of your own." "I am happy," I protested. "Mom," Isabel gave me a knowing look. "There's a difference between contentment and joy. You taught me that, remember?" I remembered. It was something I'd told her during those dark days after Richard's arrest, when she questioned whether she would ever feel true happiness again. That weekend, Benjamin and I enjoyed a lovely dinner, followed by a walk through Charleston's historic district. His wife had died of breast cancer 5 years earlier, and he spoke of her with a respect and tenderness that touched me deeply. By the end of the evening, we had planned a second date. Life continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Marcus, who had become a cherished friend to both Isabel and me, began joining us for Sunday dinners. I couldn't help noticing the way his eyes followed Isabel, the special attention he paid to Hope. "He likes you," I observed one Sunday after he had left. "Marcus," Isabel looked genuinely surprised. "We're just friends." "For now," I agreed, not pushing. Isabel needed to rediscover herself completely before considering another relationship. But I had seen the spark between them, the easy comfort they found in each other's company. Time would tell. 6 months later, we gathered at the waterfront for a special occasion, the official opening of the White Family Healing Center, a collaboration between Isabel's foundation and the local hospital. The center would provide comprehensive services for victims of all forms of abuse, legal counsel, therapy, career coaching, and art programs. "This is just the beginning," Isabel told the assembled crowd during her speech. "Our vision is to create similar centers across the country, ensuring no one remains trapped in abuse because of financial dependence or isolation." As I watched my daughter addressing community leaders with confidence and passion, hope balanced on her hip, I felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with that terrible discovery at the beach house had transformed all of us. Richard remained in federal prison, his appeals denied. The money he had stolen was gradually being repaid to his victims through asset seizures and the sale of his company. His name was now synonymous in Charleston business circles with fraud and betrayal. Yet from his destructive actions had emerged something beautiful: Isabel's renewed purpose, Hope's precious life, a foundation helping countless abuse victims, and a community more aware of the insidious nature of financial control. After the ceremony, Isabel, Hope, Marcus, and I walked along the same waterfront where Harold had proposed to me 40 years earlier. The water sparkled in the afternoon sun, dolphins playing in the harbor. "Mom," Isabel said suddenly, "I've been meaning to ask you something." "What is it, sweetheart?" "Do you forgive me for pushing you away when you were trying to protect me from Richard?" The question surprised me. "Isabel, there's nothing to forgive. You were manipulated by a master con artist. Your reactions were exactly what he had conditioned you to have." "Still," she insisted, "I said hurtful things. I chose him over you, repeatedly." I took her hand. "That's what abusers do. They isolate their victims from support systems. You're not responsible for his manipulation." "You saved my life, Mom," Isabel said softly. "If you hadn't discovered them at the beach house, if you hadn't called Marcus, I'd probably be in prison right now while Richard lived it up in some non-extradition country." "You saved yourself," I corrected gently. "All I did was provide a catalyst." Hope wiggled from Isabel's arms, reaching for Marcus, who swung her up onto his shoulders with practiced ease. They walked ahead, leaving Isabel and me a moment of privacy. "I never thought I'd feel happy again," Isabel admitted, watching her daughter's delight. "After everything fell apart, it seemed impossible. Yet here you are," I smiled. "Here we are," she corrected. "Both of us, rebuilding our lives on our own terms." As we continued our walk, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years. I had started it as a widow struggling with debt, watching my daughter disappear into someone else's idea of who she should be. I was ending it with my finances secure, my daughter restored to her true self, and a criminal in prison where he belonged. But the real victory wasn't the money or even the justice. It was watching Isabel paint again, laugh again, dream again. It was seeing her remember that she was strong enough to face anything life threw at her. "You know what the best part is?" Isabel said suddenly. "What?" "Richard thought he was so smart, so superior. He thought he could manipulate everyone around him forever. And instead," she smiled with satisfied justice, "he was outsmarted by 2 women he considered weak and insignificant." I laughed. "I wonder if he's figured that out yet." "Oh, I'm sure he has," Isabel replied. 15 years in prison gives a person a lot of time to think about their mistakes. As the sun began to set over Charleston Harbor, casting golden light across the water, I felt a profound sense of peace. Sometimes protecting the people you love means making difficult choices. Sometimes it means letting them hate you temporarily so they can love themselves permanently. Richard Green had tried to steal more than money. He'd tried to steal my daughter's identity, her confidence, her future. But he'd underestimated the strength that runs in white women. We bend, but we don't break. And when we fight back, we fight to win. What would you do if someone you loved was being manipulated and controlled? Have you ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal? Comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.